All right. So in the meantime, so Mr. Nelson, Herbert Nelson, could you please introduce your moderator? Thank you.
I will. This panel is very close to my heart, and the person who is moderating is my younger brother, retired Air Force veteran of 23 years. He's got all kinds of backgrounds in cyber, as well as electronics and computers and satellites, and he's got a whole bunch of accolades from the government to go along with it. So without further ado, I let him introduce himself and members of his panel, and we get going. Sorry for running a little bit over. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, panelists, attendees, and leadership. Thank you for having us. I think Herb saved me a couple of minutes by doing a partial introduction. So now that you know who I am, I'll just delve right into our program because we have quite a bit to cover. Okay, just to reiterate, I'm Garth Nelson, moderator for today's panel on cyber AI. What is cyber AI? It is a conflation, some people call it, okay, a conglomeration, collaboration of two extremely important facets of technology. AI, artificial intelligence, as is better known, was introduced essentially to sort of bring us closer to the edge, to intimate human behavior as much as possible. And in so doing, it has really given us some sort of leaps and bounds. It's brought us leaps and bounds. It's given us some tremendous abilities that we never had before in terms of trying to mimic human behavior. It brings us closer to solutions. This particular panel today will talk about the solutions or the assistance that is brought to cybersecurity, which is near and dear to our hearts. Okay, the whole idea of cybersecurity is centered around the fact that we have to protect our industry, our power plants, our hospitals, definitely our military establishment, as I can attest to, okay? And even the grocery store we go to is subject to being intruded upon unless we take the necessary steps to protect it. Now, all of that being said, I've assembled what I consider a very distinguished panel of SMEs today, subject matter experts, to talk about this. The way we will do this, each of my panelists will take 20 minutes to address a particular area, and we will culminate with the final 20 minutes of an open discussion where our panelists will exchange ideas or question each other, whatever at their discretion, to all enhance the knowledge, if you will, of the attendees and fellow panelists. Okay, first I have Stephen Wang. Stephen is a doctoral candidate in cybersecurity who has a wide breadth of experience in software development and engineering, distributed computing systems, but most importantly, he's an author of several cyber papers that he had successfully put out. Very, very, very ingenious, if you will. And Stephen is going to give us his spiel. Turn it over to him so he can get started.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for your time. I just wanted to stress that companies and organizations in the Caribbean, sort of one that I researched was Royal Caribbean. They face over 1 million cyber attacks a day. And overpayments is one type of cyber attack. And this type of attack is usually conducted by various groups of people, but it's very popular within Nigerians. And it's a con in which victims are given a share of finances for facilitating a transfer of money, but are later told they have to put some more money in order to get it to work, which doesn't make any sense. There's several other cyber attacks like ransomware that attack Caribbean tax authorities. And there's also hacktivism. Hacktivism is a problem where it could be a group, people that don't agree with some cause. Maybe they think some organization or some business is getting too big or greedy, so they'll hack their database for financial gain, political gain, or it could be a person acting from a foreign government that doesn't agree with what's going on. That's hacktivism. And there's also denial of service where it's a fake person inquiring about a website, and there's so many people that are like zombie computers that are going to a website or e-commerce business that it completely shuts the business down and does not work correctly like it's supposed to. There's also ransomware. I mentioned that earlier. It's basically when some information gets hijacked, or it's like a malware commonly used to extort money from businesses. Basically, they hijack some information and they make you pay for it in order to get access to it. It happens in schools a lot also. I've heard a lot of stories from Mr. Nelson about how the Caribbean schools are being attacked by ransomware, where they can't get access to their studies or student information. There's also corporate data breaches where information from businesses and corporations, they're unable to get the data, and the data's still there, but people who aren't authorized to get it have access to it, and most of these people are untrustworthy. And it's also a problem because some of these people could have a criminal background and exploit that information. Okay, I'm going to go into some more details about some other types of, I'm going to just summarize them, like confidence and romance fraud. That's when someone basically, they claim they're in love with somebody, or they pretend to be in love with somebody, and they basically extort money from them saying, oh, my grandma died. I need $100. I need $500. Can you send it to my bank account? And then they never see that person or anybody again, and they just take off once they do that. I've seen a lot of that online, where you go online and someone says they have a sick grandparent, and they show a fake picture or fraudulent picture of somebody, and they say, please upload your money to this link for a donation, and you can't even trace where it came from. A lot of these people are very polished and they know what they're doing, and it's very hard to detect when they're being fraudulent or not. There's also business email compromise, and these scammers target businesses that work with foreign companies or that rely more to make wire transfers. It's something for individuals targeted. In both, the scammers use social engineering and computer evasion to sucker people into making fund transfers to unauthorized recipients. Sorry about that. And then there's phishing. That's the classic one, where you get emails, texts, and calls from scammers that pretend to be legitimate companies in order to try to get sensitive data from you about login information. So then they might say, hi, we're with Wells Fargo, with the Jamaica bank, and we're trying to figure out what's going on. Can you please give us our username and password so we could authorize the transaction? And people do, and then that scam company will take that information and go into other people's bank accounts and then openly rob them, and there's no way of tracing them. And then there's also personal data breach, where it could be someone's personal data, maybe on a dating site or at a bank, and that personal information has been leaked to people that are not authorized to see it, and they could exploit it. So I'm gonna go into some other details. There was another attack called a non-payment. Basically, people add for delivery or service, and they order something online from an e-commerce business, and they don't get the money, or they don't get the money back, or they don't get what they ordered, and that's very frustrating. I've experienced that before too. So a lot of companies and a lot of banks have something in America. They have a thing called FDIC that reimburses money that you've lost. So what I'm going to do now is show you a security plan that I developed when I was in college at the DeVry Keller Graduate School of Management. The reason why I came up with a security policy is because it's been a serious problem with e-commerce sites, and I worked on it with a co-student called Xavier Jackson. That was my co-worker. I'm going to try and share my screen. Hold on one second, everybody. Can everybody see? I don't think so yet. Hold on one second.
Not yet.
I lost my spot somewhere. Hold on a second. There it is. Sorry about that. Make the screen bigger. There we go. Share. Here we go. And there it is. All right. So I'm going to make this to 100%. There we go. So it's a security plan document. So basically the purpose is, say, a hypothetical company like Saverdime. It's a centralized e-commerce business, and they do online transactional payments. So what we did was we developed a risk assessment to expose e-commerce risks depending on the business policies. like operational practices, fraud prevention, detection, security controls, and types of services that they provide. Everyone at Cyberdyne should understand the risk associated with the transactions, and you should do that with the Jamaica e-commerce sites also. They should understand that there's a risk for fraud and people that pretend or masquerade as a company. They might put a similar website that looks just like Cyberdyne up there to try to thwart people's information in order to steal, just like how cryptocurrency is being stolen by people right now. Unfortunately, there are several ways in which customers can be confused when selecting a payment choice. Providing option for selecting payment brand gives the customer a clear payment choice. So it's good to distinguish it and be in compliance with the federal and international audits that people have. A lot of organizations like the European Union have like special laws that regulate cybersecurity, and they have audits. So with these audits, you can basically stay in compliance, and other people from other nations would be able to utilize your website because you'll be in compliance with them. And if something gets stolen or some activity or fraudulent activity happens, you won't be at fault, and you just report it to their security operations center in the European Union or wherever governing territory, wherever they belong. So we tried to implement the use of firewalls, intrusion prevention systems, intrusion detection systems, and we recommend that you get a secure SSL certificate. And SSL certificate for e-commerce security is very effective. I have one myself for my personal e-commerce website. And organizations of security information, you're supposed to distinguish everybody in the organization who is associated with it should have a role and responsibility. Even the cashier, the janitor, everybody is responsible because they're all stakeholders of the business. If that business goes out of business, everybody suffers. So the manager and team lead, assistant manager or group leaders, help desk or triage staff, and incident handlers. There's also vulnerability handlers, artifact analysis staff, platform specialists, trainers, and technology watch. Everybody should be educated and involved with whatever business is being used on e-commerce, because sometimes they have a brick and mortar system set up where it's a personal store, say on a block like a grocery store, and then they have an option that we could order online. Everybody there should be accountable for what's going on and vigilant. So the accountability of assets, I put this here, just lets everybody knows what their roles are. And like I mentioned earlier, federal, state regulations, and of course, international regulations. They should have a communication. Everybody should have a computer security incident response team. I've been a part of one. You could invite people who are interested in the field from local colleges and start a pilot program and have them set up, in order to, get some more experience. That's what I did when I was in college. And these incident response teams are utilized for the standard elements of security communication services, proactive services, and incident response services. So I could give this copy to everyone so they can see what I worked on. And then I have some charts that we cited from other websites like incident response, preparation, detection, analysis, containment, eradication, and recovery. It's very important when you're doing incident response to have a backup server when dealing with information. A server kind of saves information somewhere, and a backup server prevents you from it being a total loss. It could be at a warehouse, maybe in Connecticut. It could be in England. It's just good to have a backup server somewhere in a remote location where if your business gets shut down or through a cyber attack, you have that backup information that you can rely on. It's almost like you lose all your money and you have a safe underneath your bed and you have a backup of maybe $500 so you can still pay your rent. It's that kind of thing. It's just like a security to have something like that. So the steps for incident response team, I'm just going to summarize it. It's prepare, identify, contain, eradicate, and recover. I said that earlier. And I have the summary of preparation. So it's like a crucial step in incident response team to decide how an organization will have the ability to be responsible if the attack were to happen. It is mandatory to have various key standards to have been utilized and proceed to give the organization the ability to take care of an incident. So I'm gonna jump to the PowerPoint. I'm gonna give everybody a copy of this. Hold on one second, I had it back there. Hope you can still see my screen. You can still see my screen, right?
Yes.
Perfect. I'm going to jump to this real quick. Hope I have enough time. So you have this is what I work with, my professor, Jackson Breezy, and I'm give credit to Xavier and Jackson with this also. So the description of the project, like mentioned earlier, examines a e-commerce security by investigating the recent market trends for e-business. So this was made about a year and a half ago, just before I graduated, and the legal aspects of privacy concerns and methodologies. So we did hardware. We set up a fabricated system of Cisco Analyst Catalyst 2960L and just made a suggestion that they should have this for hardware to be implemented in the system. We suggested a certain type of router, type of software we'll be working with. In the SSL certificate, we kept stressing that for the software. And then the infrastructure, we described the infrastructure here. Now we are going into the incident response team with cyberware. Okay, so incident response preparation. We have preparation, detection analysis, post-incident activities, containment, eradication, and recovery. So first step is to have employee training, incident detection, incident classification, create a team. It doesn't have to be the perfect team. We just have to have a building awareness and have some kind of initiative and have cross-training, testing, simulations, and security policies. There's nothing wrong with coming up with your own security policies as long as it helps the business be implemented or carry out the way you want it to be carried out. So activate established security operation professionals. That's what that was. It's basically creating your own SOC. But we'll talk about that later on when we make suggestions. And then monitoring tools, log reports, user complaints, and containment procedures. So I have the contact chief security officer for the active security incident response team. That's what SIRT means. Isolation systems, I think that's the isolated warehouse where you could do your business continuity plan. Because I know the Caribbean, it's not exactly all about cyber threats. They get hit by hurricanes and natural disasters all the time. So it's good to have a backup operation facility in case these events do occur, whether it's a cyber threat, a war attack, or just a general hurricane of any kind. It's good to have a backup system, and just in case something were to happen. It could be in another country, another state, or another region. And then incident response plans, post-incident activities, document defining. So this is basically the post-incident activities is where you learn from your mistakes. So we say we document what we discovered, report to external agencies like Homeland Security, or if maybe there's another SOC at another agency that was affected, we report it to them. Conduct all after-action review, disseminate findings, and update policies and procedures. So this is the disaster recovery plan. This is what I was talking about hurricanes, tornadoes, or whatnot. And this is the disaster recovery plan about going out of business. It's basically prevents the company from going out of business by having a business continuity plan. Say there's a flood, an accident, an attack. This business continuity plan allows the business to continue. It's basically how it sounds. So disaster recovery plan, 5 phases. I mentioned this earlier. Our preparation, response, recovery, resumption, and restoration. This here lists all the risk analysis, like tracing the origin of the problem, likelihood, and damage done by equipment inventory. And disaster recovery planning process has a contingency plan, which is being prepared for when things go wrong. It's like my professor was always stressing, you don't want to ride down the street with bald tires. You got to make up a plan, like every 6 months, you get them checked out, and then you have them replaced and have insurance on them. You got to have a plan when you go out there. You can't just go out there, have a business, and not expect anything bad to happen. Is basically what I'm stressing. So these are the team considerations. Have a disaster management plan, a communications team, network recovery team, software issues and malware recovery team, database backup recovery team. That's the big one for data breaches. A facility recovery team, say maybe a backup. Maybe you have a shop that you have in the back, like a second string shop, where you own a market somewhere, and then when that facility gets attacked or a natural disaster, you automatically move all your assets to that facility from a warehouse and start continuing business. It could be a market, it could be a computer. You could apply this to different fields. It doesn't have to all be about information technology. That's the beauty of it. basically, this is just going into more detail about a disaster management team. And this is the response. Team members are obligated and they should carry out everything the way with multiple copies of all the documents. And pretty much it just goes into more details, has more charts. And how much time do I still have, sir?
We're looking at about 6 more minutes.
Awesome, awesome. So the disaster recovery plan restoration is when everything goes back to normal operations. Maybe you go back to the place where the damage occurred after everything was repaired, or maybe you just continue at the new site. All resources deployed for the recovery have been secured and relocated where they are needed. That's what I mentioned earlier. So if they're secured, fixed up, or relocated, that's what a disaster recovery plan is. Restoration is when everything goes back to normal. And the business continuity plan. The main goal of a business continuity plan is not to interrupt the company or disturb anything in the time of a disaster. So planning and arranging disaster measurements to help the company reach their goal with customer interpretations. Identification of proper plan and using planning and utilization of resources for company necessities to support the business continuity plan. Some of these could be government resources, it could be your personal resources, it could be assets that you left around. So these are all potential risk factors. And cyber attack is one of the #1 problems for a business continuity plan that we have to plan for. It could be accidents, cyber attacks, natural disasters, power outages, and communication failures. These are the 5 main problems with a business continuity plan that they summarize on the chart. And the concluding summary on the steps taken to create an incident response plan in our presentation, again, is to prepare, build a response team, outline response requirements and resolution times, establish a disaster recovery strategy, conduct a drill or practice scenario. So it's good to do drills like you're in the Army, make up a mock situation. There's a flood, what do we do? There's a cyber attack, denial of service attack, what do we do? Do we use the backup site, backup server? It's a lot of planning, and you could hire certified ethical hackers or train people to be certified ethical hackers to do penetration tests on your firewall to see if it's working. It's almost like the Army, where you just do practice drills, or karate, where you do practice drills so you can prepare yourself and make yourself tough when the real situation happens. And then plan a debriefing session. And during this debriefing session, you should communicate everything you learned from what happened and add it to the disaster recovery plan if you see a vulnerability. And again, this is the summary of a incident response summary. So preparation, detection, analysis, containment, eradication, and recovery. I got this from Stealth Labs on the from research. Disaster recovery plan summary are a statement, intent, disaster recovery policy, plan goals, authenticate tools such as passwords, take into consideration geographic risks and factors, tips of dealing with media, financial, and legal information, and action steps, and plan history. So remember what happened in the past. Don't forget any incident that happened in the past, because everybody can learn from it. And this is the business continuity triangle. So at the very top, you have business continuity. At the very bottom, you have service, storage, and networks. And that's part of the recovery plan at the very bottom. Everything at the very bottom is what you need to know about recovery. It's the information recovery process to have an alternate site in case you want to continue business somewhere else, like I mentioned earlier, and data backup and offsite replication. So that's, if you ever lose important business documents, make sure you have it saved on a server somewhere, and it'll be a backup copy in case you ever lose some legal battle with some other company or government organization. And then concluding summary, you have the business impact analysis, recovery strategies, plan development, and testing exercises. Like I said, with drills, where you plan out something that could happen and you test it out, make sure it works. And you find holes, have an expert come to your facility and point out weaknesses in the system. You can hire a military expert, you can hire a storm expert, a meteorologist, you could use anybody. You could be creative with this and recruit people from colleges to help out. And then consider cloud computing. You can save all your information on the cloud. I've done that so many times where I lost my paper and didn't realize I saved it on the cloud, and then it was backed up on all my computers that are linked to the cloud. I was so happy. And are there any questions? Anyone has any questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, we can probably save that for the tail end. We're just going to go through all 3 panelists, and then we can, at end, toward the last 20 minutes, is when we can field any potential questions, because I think we're about to run a little bit behind now.
Oh, I hope I didn't go over.
No, you didn't. No. But
Perfect.
we'll have some time, about 20 minutes towards the end.
Right, of course.
Re-summarize and invite any questions from the audience.
But the main thing I'm stressing is cybersecurity attacks are very creative, and you can't really avoid them most of the time. So the best thing to do would be have a backup facility. We have backup information in case that data gets breached. That would be very important. And to encrypt the data also. They're just getting creative. They're very polished and getting more and more organized as time goes by.
All righty. Thank you, Steve.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. I'm going to move on now to Francis Fagula. Francis is a senior cyber analyst in Northern Virginia. He has over 10 years experience in cybersecurity and IT platform support, advanced networking and intrusion platforms. He has extensive expertise in malware analysis, which makes him exceptionally qualified to speak on the impact of AI on security initiatives. Francis holds a BS and MS degree in cybersecurity technology from the University of Maryland University College. Francis, take it away. Hey, Steve, can you shut down your...
All right. Thank you. Actually, this is my first actual panel to be on. So I'm here to talk about artificial intelligence and what artificial intelligence is and how does it work. And we know that artificial machines and particularly computer systems that we utilize in our day-to-day activity at home, the bank, healthcare system, the grocery store, what have you. And in regards to AI and how AI works, it encompasses of daily lives and cybersecurity. It also dwells around algorithms, Python, Java, or what have you. And these programming languages are synonymous on how it functions based on human intelligence, like you and I, and what we ingest in our machine, our systems, and what we get out as we ingest systems. So the data that's ingested has to be robust and precise in what is being presented. And we have to know that there's different types of artificial intelligence that's based on what we hear AI, artificial intelligence, but we have to know that there's two that's based on technology and based on functionality. So the one that's based on technology is artificial super intelligence, artificial general intelligence, and artificial narrow intelligence. So we break those three categories down into limited memory, reverse machines, theory of mind, and self-aware. And, we're going to piggyback on Stephen Wong, when she's talking about cybersecurity systems and malware, phishing, and spam. So when it comes to artificial intelligence and how we can incorporate that in cybersecurity, we have to understand that the data that we're going to put in has to analyze patterns, and it learns from those patterns. So as we know, like if you want to look at a SIM, a SIM, IDS, detection system, prevention system, when I monitor what's coming in, that's the data that's being presented in a tool like similar to Splunk and the security. So I see an alert, like Steve when they say that's a DOS attack. So based on the data, the artificial intelligence can encompass what's going on before I can even react to what's going on. It can solve the problem issue within seconds. That's one of the issues we face. And it's a system called Arbor 2 networks. And what it does, it analyzes network activity. What's going up, what's coming in, anything that's robust, anything that's fully loaded in the system. And what it could do, it could parse the data, then crunch that data and know that once this data gets at this certain point, a threshold, then it will react and solve the issue right away. So with machine learning and artificial intelligence, we know it has to be proactive in preventing attack and responding to attack threats in real time. And that's how we get artificial intelligence to do that in a time-to-time routine task, and which enable organizations to use their resources more strategically. And it could become more proactive, it could be less expensive, and it could be more effective. But then with AI, we also want to know that AI can also be weaponized, and AI can be manipulated. And with the right tools, it could be implemented. And cyber criminals could also use AI to scoop and identify vulnerability applications and devices. So, like for example, you have your malware attacks, you have your phishing and the middle attack. You can SQL injections, zero-day exploits, and hackers can use AI as a weapon to weaponize those particular vulnerabilities in our system, even social engineering. So, you know, people, you might get a call on your cell phone. Hello, Stephen, this is so-and-so. You see that you apply for solar panels on your roof. Can you please identify your address, your phone number, and we can get someone out there for you. And that's an aspect of social engineering that could be utilized. And also, we have to spot behavior and patterns and identities and vulnerabilities when it comes to this. And also, what we use AI for in our data activity, like the types of variety of markets that utilizes the healthcare system, business, and the healthcare, of course, you have online, or people who've been to the doctor, you have my chart that you have in your phone. That's another aspect of machine learning, which could take data from you, from the doctor. So you normally get a checkup, your blood pressure, whatever the case may be, they could take that data and you use it in machine learning. And now to the point where artificial intelligence can pinpoint particular activity, medical activity within you without even seeing an actual doctor based on the information that's provided. So AI is in our healthcare, business, education. We have it in finance as an application when it comes to getting loans. And as I spoke earlier about reactive machines, AI has to take a specific task. And for example, a great example of AI was the IBM chess program. If anyone remember, that happened in the 1990s, where one of the best chess players competed against the IBM program, and which the IBM program initially won because based on certain patterns, specific patterns and data that was implemented, that it knew particularly precisely when to make the right move. So if we correlate that with cybersecurity attacks, something I could see visually through a SIM, artificial intelligence can pinpoint that right away because it has the security, self-awareness, and the theory of mind as well. So, and those examples like automation, that could definitely use in artificial intelligence, technology singularity, and which is like taking to understand how things happen, certain patterns happen in artificial intelligence and cybersecurity thereof. So when it comes to malware and phishing and various things, there's one particular example of Wawa that had a data breach because they released something open in vulnerability that they're not able to see, and artificial intelligence is able to send that and pinpoint particular activity within the network, in the system, and how to utilize that information. And when it comes to like Splunk enterprise security, which I use as an employer, and that analyzes, because I take data ingested in Splunk, which is a program, a tool that we use, and it could take that data and parse it out and give me certain alerts that got pinpoint. And there's certain things I'm not able to see, but usually machine learning can take that to the next step and endeavor and deploy certain options to mitigate certain attacks and deployment. So with AI, there's the pros and cons of using AI. AI, we use that to our best advantage of our day-to-day activity, but also we should further discuss during the discussion how AI could be a con. And also when it comes to jobs and employment, what have you, and even Tesla creating their trucks to allow, like for example, you have Amazon. So imagine you using AI machine learning for a truck, whereas you don't need a truck driver. That's another aspect of artificial intelligence we could talk about. Thank you.
Real quick, Francis, since you still have a few minutes, this forum is focused on Caribbean, Africa, emerging economies.
Yes.
In terms of technology, how soon could they reasonably expect that AI could take effect and have a positive effect in these economies? Does it need leading edge technology, fourth generation, fifth generation, or some of these economies obviously are still in the first, second, to third transitional areas in terms of technological generation? How mature an infrastructure do they need to sort of interject AI technology to be effective for them? How might it help? And how soon could we actually get it into these economies?
Well, that depends on the type of infrastructure thereof and what you would need AI to present when it comes to your infrastructure, because you have to think about the cost efficiency of using AI, and how that could be potential to what your outcome is and what you want to potentially use it for. So, like AI, when it comes to stocks, or something like you see stocks across the screen and using artificial intelligence, or when it comes to crypto and NFTs, using cyber intelligence to give you pinpoint analysis of what's going on, what trends are going to come, what's going to come down, and be able to take that information and utilize that information to a potential that would be significant to what you want to bring, especially to your region or country, what have you.
Okay. So my suspicion is they have more than enough in terms of academic expertise. Now, in terms of equipment, computer system, distributed systems, any specific insight you could provide there, insight in terms of what they might need in terms of, distributing computer systems or cyber systems, intrusion systems. How would AI be interjected seamlessly? How could it be interjected seamlessly into these economies? I'm trying to find a way here to give these people some insight, into all of our technical presentations and how we might be able to sort of create or convert them to tangible resources in the near term. So that's kind of what I'm searching for, from these questions. Yeah. If I decided to set up, say, in Jamaica tomorrow, where still an emerging economy, there's some measured amount of technology. How could we get, an effective backbone to make AI work for us down there with all the scamming and all the other stuff that's taking place?
Yeah. First, you want to implement, of course, programmers, analysts, doing data analysts, and find out what your meaning is and what it's currently is and how you utilize particular resources. So if you or I need to come on board and say, hey, Francis, we need to utilize this, I say, okay, statistically, we can implement this particular technology. So when it comes to, let's say, roads or something, or when it comes to structural, or when it comes to weather, particular area, that is Stephen mentioned about like the weather, for example. I said statistically based on this statistics, this region can get a lot of rain. So then we want to get engineers and get the engineers based on this time of the year, keep it this, or based on this. If you want to do some plants when it comes to farming and cropping and soil, where you could do a data analytics to find out what's the best time of the year to do cropping and how to use that cropping and how to benefit you economically.
So this might be adaptable, like the universities is really what you're saying in academia, maybe a great place to start then, and then sort of fan out from there. Is that, am I interpreting correctly?
That's correct. So you want to get the resources and get those people together and how to utilize those resources.
Okay. All right. I'm sure there's some curiosity about this, the audience, this is a very prevalent sort of technology, and it's kind of taking us over, and it's moving so rapidly, it's evolving so rapidly. You know, that's one of the big interests that I have, you know, if it gets back to Jamaica or Trinidad or Ghana somewhere, you know, how quickly, you know, how would it be impeded by second generation technologies, or could we overcome that? You know, how could we implement it? Just a software, you know, and maybe older computer technology. All righty. I said we'll have more in the final session when we get you guys all together. My next panelist is going to be, last but not least, Miss Daniela Fleming. She's a certified information security, system security professional, and an engineer. She owns the founder of Covenant Security Solutions, a 19-year-old organization that's earned a stellar reputation providing exhaustive expertise to the federal government. So she provided a lot of government support. She knows about government, what government needs are, and generally, you know, sort of how to meet them. She won the Black Engineer Award in 2001 for the most promising engineer in government. And as a BS in engineering from the University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana, one of my own stomping grounds from my Air Force days. Okay, she does have her full bio available on her website, covenantsecurity.com. And what she wants to share today, I think, is primarily some innovative approaches to improving our digital way of life. Very broad topic, obviously covers a lot, you know, in ties, you know, sort of it covers a lot of ground, and it gives us a lot of insight into where we should be looking to improve ourselves, you know, not only the cyber world, but technology as a whole. Daniela, please take it away.
All right, thank you so much, Garth, and also the two panelists prior to me. I think you set such a great foundation. Stephen, giving an overview of what is cyber, what are all the different aspects that we talk about when we talk about the concept of cybersecurity, and also Francis giving the foundation of what artificial intelligence is and how we can actually use that in cyber. So my job is kind of to take that and sift out the pros and cons, and then also to provide some potential solutions that can be utilized. So let's start with the pros. One of the things that Francis was talking about is very true. We don't have right now in cybersecurity in a very grand scale is the ability to parse and correlate massive amounts of information. Right now, as it stands, a lot of organizations are getting mammoth amount of information. They have sensors everywhere. It's similar to having a fire detector, but they have them all over the place. They're all giving them information. But the question is, what does it mean? And without being able to correlate that information in a very close to near real-time fashion, you're finding organizations having to be without the type of protection that they need, and finding themselves days, weeks later, months, sometimes behind the curve of finding out that they've been hacked or they've had information stolen. So one of the great things about artificial intelligence is that it is allowing us to parse and correlate information in what I would call near real time capability. It also learns and identifies patterns across networks. So what used to take us all these different places, he had mentioned Splunk. Splunk is one of the tools that people, they made a lot of money being able to take all this disparate data and pull it together for people, but that's still an issue for a lot of organizations. Like I can have information coming in off of my firewall. I can have information coming in off of my antivirus. I can have information coming in from multiple different sources. Those are what I'm calling sensors. And you know, once you have that information, you have to be able to make a picture out of it to know, how do I protect my information? How do I protect my organization? And so what AI is allowing us to do now is to be able to take that information and to get patterns and to be able to detect issues very, very quickly. So that jumps right into the third piece of acceleration of detection and response of cyber threats. We're able to do in near real time what would take sometimes weeks, sometimes months, in terms of looking through data to figure out what's really going on this network. And even more so, and I'm going to get into that in terms of one of the solutions now, they're able to take the information that it's collecting and learning in real time and be able to say that I see this as a potential threat on the network. So I'm going to jump out ahead and say and notify the security operations center to say, I think you're actually actively being hacked. And so that's one of the great things I think that has come out of being able to use artificial intelligence, the ability to kind of really speed up an organization's way to understand what's going on and to get near real-time feedback. The last two here dealing with identity access management, an example is CAPTCHA that pulls information in from multiple sources actually to determine whether or not you are who you say you are when you go into a network, a site, etc. And then the last piece is scalability. And that kind of dovetails with the first piece of parsing large amounts of information. Artificial intelligence allows us to scale our cybersecurity operations in a way that we've never been able to, and with an accuracy we haven't been able to. You may have teams disparate all over the world, especially a lot of large organizations and governments. They don't necessarily just have one or two people. They've got teams that are globally dispersed. And so one team may see something and another team may not necessarily see that. And so what artificial intelligence has allowed is the ability to get that common picture across all of these different disparate and a common view of, okay, what should we be doing next? And how should we be responding to this? And that's been a big leap forward, I think, in terms of the usability of artificial intelligence in cybersecurity. And last but not least, it actually reduces costs and resources, which I'll go into because that's also a con, because as more artificial intelligence systems are being built and rolled out, some of the things that people were doing prior, for example, a lot of the low-level analyst type jobs within security operations centers, you're probably going to find a lot of those starting to go away, because those were the people that picked up those log reports and the output and said, you know, what does this mean, and start parsing it for the higher level folks. So there is some reduction in cost and resources. Next, getting to the cons. When we talk about cons in artificial intelligence, it goes across different areas. And as Francis was talking about, it really depends on the type of artificial intelligence that is being deployed. But one thing I did want to bring up is that this technology is still in development. It is something that we're learning as much as the machines are learning what it can and it can't do. So one of the things that I wanted to bring up is that there are conclusions that sometimes the artificial intelligence makes that aren't necessarily fully accurate. So to give a real world example, one of the things, for example, with artificial intelligence and being utilized for camera systems, right? A lot of security companies are utilizing these artificial intelligence cameras and artificial intelligence so that they can auto detect if there's a criminal, if there's someone that's entering an airport or a bus station or a shop and doing something nefarious. These cameras are programmed to identify certain types of movements, behaviors, etc. But one thing that they found with a lot of these cameras is they don't always necessarily identify and do well when you're dealing with darker complexions. And so where that has caused issues, for example, here in the States, they've had people who've been arrested for something because the camera said, well, I saw you there. Or it made a conclusion, like one particular issue that happened in Chicago was there was an older gentleman who had picked up someone, a young man in his neighborhood. He drove him to his home. When he dropped him off at his home, I guess the guy, he had someone there waiting from a gang, and they proceeded to shoot and kill him. Well, what the AI camera saw was this old man's license plate and the gunfire going off. So it made a correlation that somehow this old man must have been the one that shot him. And it took, unfortunately, he didn't have a lot of money, so he sat in jail for a year until a person got the chance to sit down and say, hey, you know what? It made some assumptions that weren't accurate at all. So those are some of the things I would say, you know, in terms of deployment of artificial intelligence is very helpful. It can kind of narrow things down. However, there are some issues with it's a program, right? It's like any other program. And I think Francis hit the nail on the head when he said, you know, you have to get very precise data. And so we're still getting to the place of trying to get that precise data and trying to get these systems learning across cultures, right, as well. So those are some of the things to think about in terms of conclusions. I think also some of the cons that are starting to come up are ethics. How far do we go? How far do we utilize artificial intelligence? You know, if you watching the news now, you're seeing some things around Google, and they purportedly have a sentient artificial intelligence, which means that it's thinking and feeling at the level of a 7 and 8 year old. We really don't know what that means. We don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. And we really don't know if we go through looking at artificial intelligence, I think a lot of more questions than answers. And so as you know, you deploy them, as you these technologies, be very clear that some of they cross boundaries that we haven't really thought about yet. And especially from a government standpoint, for the idea for about cybersecurity, but there's that fine about privacy. How much information are you utilizing in order to make this work? Okay. The next piece is that, and this was brought up twice, is that hackers do use AI. So while I know a lot of organizations are kind of leery about the first 2 points I mentioned, the third point, the fourth point is actually one of the things to think about, that hackers are utilizing artificial intelligence to help them execute hacks in some ways almost flawlessly. Where if you don't have an artificial intelligence system, sometimes it's very difficult to find what transpired. And last but not least in the cons is job loss. As I mentioned, it does require less resources because some of the things that people were doing were more than likely going to move for AI to do. Okay. And to get into two particular items that are in use today that actually Covenant works with. One is Darktrace. This is a UK-based company that is has an AI that is self-learning that you can utilize on your networks today. And what it does is that it goes out and just like your human immune system, it learns what is normal for your organization and what is not. So it'll go into your email inbox and say, Garth always emails Francis 2 o'clock, maybe every other week. And it'll understand that if all of a sudden Garth is emailing him at 11 o'clock, on a Wednesday, that maybe there's something that's not right with this and someone needs to take a further look at it. So it's basically creating a scenario where this system is going in and not only looking for existing attacks, but also looking for potential attacks and potential anomalies in how your network is operating. And so it looks at both your emails, your endpoints, and does threat detection across your system. So there's multiple different platforms that they offer. Given the limited time I have, I do encourage you, I have the link here so you can go to our website and we talk a little bit more about exactly what Darktrace offers. And they do also have a free 30-day trial if you're interested in learning how they do that. It's their system is considered sort of like an immune system that you have for cybersecurity. Okay. And then last but not least, how we're utilizing it as well within Covenant is that we have a cyber risk portal. And so if you remember at the very beginning of our discussion, Steve was sharing with you about, the different things that you need to be doing in order to protect your network. So, and that there's different cyber regulations. So how we're utilizing artificial intelligence is to take all of these different cyber regulations and we're allowing an organization or an individual company to go in, take a very short questionnaire. And when that questionnaire is done, we're using the technology to correlate how well do you meet the compliance standards of various regulatory guidance, both international, whether it's ISO 27001 or the NIST cybersecurity framework, HIPAA, which is the compliance for healthcare, and there's about 6 or 7 different ones that we go across. And so we're able to take something that in the past, as he mentioned, we've been around 19 years, so whew, time flies when you're having fun. And so we remember a time when this activity would take literally weeks to months, depending upon the size of your organization. We're able to do that through AI now in minutes. Once you finish going in and putting the information in, then we're able to correlate all of that and give you an idea of where you stand. And then from there, also be able to correlate the information to help you to start to self-heal, similar to the Anagena product with dark trace, except for we're doing it from a compliance. So this is what is required. This is what an auditor would look for if they came out to your organization. You're able to get that information very, very rapidly at a very low cost. The other piece that we're doing with the artificial intelligence is being able to take these risk assessments and to correlate them across your supply chain in near real time. So as soon as someone finishes an assessment, say you might be a government entity and you have 1,000 different suppliers, everyone from the people who are coming in to do your IT to those folks who are providing maybe food. And you need to understand as they come into your system, what are the risks that they're bringing to your organization? And so through artificial intelligence, we're able to take that simple risk assessment and then correlate that information to give you an idea of what their risk looks like against your risk, and also being able to tell how that's going to impact you broadly. So this also has a free risk assessment that you can take as well at the site https://riskcovenantsec.io. So this kind of concludes my portion of it. I wanted to hand it back over to Garth, and we can get into questions.
Well, real quick, as in the case with Francis earlier, obviously you have worked extensive amounts of time, probably most of your career, with the U.S. federal government, supporting them. Don't know if you've done any foreign government assistance at all, but I guess what I'm getting at here is, again, a day in the life. If you were asked tomorrow by somebody from Africa, there are people on this program who are associated with governments in Africa and the Caribbean. Okay, how could we implement a program, a healthy sort of program of cyber sort of oversight, which is sorely needed, because many of the problems we're seeing now in the continental United States, that you and I have witnessed in our everyday work, are prevalent and present, even the smallest of islands, where they're almost defenseless in some cases, to stop some of these attacks. What could you offer in terms of insight as to how they could grow a program, the genesis of a program that would basically provide an infrastructure, a firewall around them, so to speak, and they could gradually build, like specifically law enforcement, in terms of, people who could use AI for the betterment, if you will, with all the smugglers and scammers, and all the gun running that takes place, in that particular region. How might you be able to help with technology just in terms of cost, initial cost not being, over and above what could be afforded, and time of implementation? How could we manage a program like this typically? If you were speaking to a government person in an economy that's,
Right. If I'm speaking to a government person, my intention would be for them to start with a portal like this, what I'm showing you with the cyber risk portal, because what it is going to afford them is the ability to get an idea of where they stand against standards, right? Because that's going to be the place to start for any program. You really have to understand where you are from a compliance standpoint. Where do you fit? What are the things that matter to your country, to your organizations that you have within government? So for example, what would happen from a treasury standpoint is a little bit different than what you would be looking for cybersecurity wise from, say, transportation. So all those different components and aspects really need to have a centralized place from which they're garnering requirements, and they're understanding and interpreting the requirements from the same place. So that's almost, I would say, a bit of a lessons learned from the US federal government side, because when we first started, we didn't have portals like this. We didn't have a way to use artificial intelligence to bring all of this together. So each agency had a overarching government document that came out of the National Institute of Standards, and then they all kind of parsed out their own version of how that fit to their environment. Where now with artificial intelligence, you're able to say, this is, you know, we have a group of standards that we're using, and those standards, and this is how we expect those standards to be applied uniformly across our environment. And that makes a very big difference when you go back out to say, how do we go and implement those missing pieces? And that's where you can get into a dark trace, or you can get into other tools that are out there that help actually provide that technical protection, in addition to there's three tenets. Let me back up a little bit. There's three tenets to cybersecurity. So there's people, process, and technology. And so this is kind of providing that umbrella under which you can understand what are the things that you need to do for your people, what's the type of training that you need, who are the types of people that you need. Do you have a security officer? What should they know? What should they be doing? How are you structuring that within the organization? When we talk about process, this is where you get into the governance. What are those policies? What are those specific things that need to be rolled out across the organization? So for example, you know, are people allowed to bring their own device? How should they be using their devices within the context, especially when you talk about government? Because they have a lot more stringent privacy laws and considerations within the government space than you do in private sector. And lastly, the technology. When we talk about, you know, deployment of things like firewalls, and I think eventually that's going to go away when you have a product like a dark trace, because it's covering so much within the environment. So being able to really just get first an umbrella, because that umbrella and that understanding is what's going to feed what the additional activities are within the organization to protect themselves, whether that's government or private.
All righty. So at this stage, what I'd like to do is thank you for that very, very insightful delivery. You know, and we do have, of course, we have until 2:30, I believe. I just got a flag from the chairman. I had a question. The answer is we're finished with the main part, the delivery part of it. What I'd like you guys to do is provide some sort of insight in terms of your final thoughts, you know, and expand on it, you know, how we could typically get, we could typically, you know, leave some information, some usable, tangible information behind for this audience, you know, in terms of all of the technologies you've presented. You know, what could we do? You know, basically, not just from an AI perspective. AI might still be years away from most Caribbean and African countries. You know, how could we shorten that gap, so to speak? What could we do in the interim to sort of create these opportunities for these governments? They're not third world, obviously, they're developing, emerging economies. You know, what could we do from a US standpoint? You know, our technology is extremely advanced. Where could we start?
I had one question that could probably inform this direction. We're really focused on, again, the crime and security. We know about the scamming, but we know also that elections in the Caribbean are equally at risk as other things. And so AI is already at play, we believe, in how social media is being utilized. Deep fakes as well as are out there, we understand. So could you at least also think about those issues that are already available and being utilized by people who may not be in the Caribbean, but they're certainly are being paid by people in the Caribbean to do this kind of work? How might civil society be prepared to respond as we move from this session into corruption and transparency in the last session of the day? Thank you.
Who wants to take that first? Again, you know, just from a policy standpoint, I think what Dr. Nelson is asking is, which is what I said earlier, what could this forum contribute to sort of initiatives that have already been started in the Caribbean? You heard some initiatives she just mentioned. What could we contribute if we were asked tomorrow morning from an island government to, who desperately need in elections or something like that? I think, Daniela, you mentioned something about me and Francis talking and realizing that our time has changed and the pointers that there might be from a law enforcement perspective. If they were looking at, at the criminal behavior or trying to detect criminal behavior, what might that indicate? How could they capitalize on that?
Absolutely. And I think, just to back up a little bit, to be very tangible, I think that there are technologies out there already today that can be implemented without necessarily saying you have to create a lot of infrastructure. However, in adopting those technologies, is very important to go back and make sure there's the educational foundation within the Caribbean, within your jurisdiction, that understand how that technology is being used. And as I mentioned earlier, there's boundaries, right? There's boundaries about how it's being used in law enforcement. There's boundaries around how it's even being utilized within cybersecurity. So I think that in terms of getting off the ground, I mentioned too, there's a lot more technologies out there that are utilizing artificial intelligence at some core level that can give an economies of scale at a very cost-effective manner. So for example, our risk portal, we offer that on a subscription basis for a single user at $24.99 per month. That's extremely cost-effective compared to if in the past we had people go out and do a cyber assessment that would cost you starting about $5,000 to $10,000 US. So, those types of economies of scale can be brought in immediately by going out and researching and bringing those technologies to bear. But behind it, I would very much suggest bringing in the resources to start programs, expand programs on artificial intelligence so that you have the capability within the country to develop those capabilities on your own. Because like I was saying, some of these capabilities, unfortunately, because a lot of the research has been done in for lack of a better term, non-people of color environment, they don't do well in detection. They don't have the algorithms that say, hey, this is what's going on and this is what I'm really seeing. So I think there's such a need for that and such a need to have these tailored, especially as you look at things expanding and changing in the world.
So Stephen, from your perspective, you took obviously the broader route to, overarching cybersecurity, from a cause and effect perspective. What could you contribute, maybe based on what you heard Dr. Nelson say just now, electioneering, areas that are traditionally jeopardized or in some way, shape or fashion, by maybe abnormal activity or the potential for abnormal activity. What could you generate, contribute to this forum?
I think they should have a pilot program. That's what I did when I was younger. I think they should get the young people involved in it. Kind of like almost like a Boy Scout thing, or I hate to say Boy Scout, it doesn't sound too good, like a tattletale, but something to get the youth involved in the problem. Kind of like they want to go into the field or be part of the solution. To get if they want to go into like be a computer scientist or learn more about technology, I'd go to the local universities and recruit students and start a program where they can protect information and build up their resume so that if they decide to go to other parts of the world like America and get a job, they'd be very successful.
All right. You want to add anything to that, Francis, from your perspective? In terms of technical know-how, what would you, from your perspective, be able to give to an emerging economy, to bring them up to speed in terms of overall cyber management protection and mechanisms?
What Stephen said was correct. Also initiate some type of initiative in certain developing countries that don't have the particular resources like we have here in the US. So like I just thought about like how the World Bank does it when they go to different countries and they're able to know what particular countries need and evaluate what successes these developing countries may need, if it's either food, nutrition, health services, education, water, what have you, and shelter. So in retrospect of that, there should be something similar to the World Bank that says, like, we're going to develop initiatives to help developing countries have computer-based programs that help their economy, they help their education system, businesses, what have you. So you can start from the ground up with students and have scholarship or aid to help those students within programs and schools to train them, to give them success and avenues to help their country within. So you don't have to go to the US and build the US economy. You could do it within.
Okay.
Can I add one thing? I think
Yeah,
they
go ahead.
should. I was talking to Mr. Herbert Nelson yesterday. I think they should combine all the security operations centers in the Caribbean, make one big one, kind of like how they do with NATO, but they apply it to security operations centers, where it's just one big where it's
Something centralized.
centralized. Yes, that's the word I'm looking for.
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay. Any final words, guys? Any, Stephen, Francis?
It's good. They should secure their own computers with their own personal firewalls. Most Windows computers and laptops have their own personal firewalls, but a lot of people don't know about it. And it's good to just give them like a pamphlet about hardening their system. Basically, they might have a laptop, a smartphone, or something, and you should pass out pamphlets that tell them how to make it more secure, so they could protect their information from their own standpoint, along with going on the network at the same time. So the stores could protect their networks, and they can harden their laptops and desktops by putting on activating the network firewall, or buying their own personal firewall. They could get one. They probably sell them at the thrift store. I wouldn't be surprised, but there's different 50 websites where you could buy stuff like that. It's not too expensive. Yeah, that's about all I have to say for right now. Just educating them about how to secure their information a little better. It would be very helpful.
You have another comment, Francis?
Yeah, I want to know how, like, some of these countries, how are their systems versus the US? Like, if we're going to harden a system or network, or how do their systems compare to the US? Like the infrastructure when it comes to security, like based on like satellites, networks. Like, how do you harden those systems?
Mm-hmm. Well, back to my earlier statement, I can speak to a little bit of that. In terms of maturity, you're talking backbone telecommunications, international, obviously the islands, they have the conventional means of communications, submarine cables, some of which I built, satellite systems, some of which I built. They do have all of your, what you might consider up-to-date broadband type communication systems, but they don't have, and that's why hence this forum is a sufficiently robust infrastructure to protect all of those systems. The optical systems are fairly safe, just by technological, happenstance. They have to be protected. They self-protect. When you're dealing with light, it's harder to hack, but it's not impossible. But I guess where I'm going with this is, anything that you see here in terms of technology that you work with right now, you could probably find an instance of it somewhere in Port of Spain or Kingston or somewhere. But the bottom line is what they really, really need, as Stephen alluded to, is the education, the rank and file. Do they have enough technologists to work with the technology? Okay. The answer is yes, the universities are really moving leaps and bounds, and that's why I look to you guys to sort of provide maybe hints to this forum as to how we may enhance, you with a graduate of cyber systems, how some of our colleges back home, like there's a Northern Caribbean University, there's a UWI, there's UTEC, one of my old stomping grounds. How could we maybe help these folks to, sort of advance their level of effort, and catch up, so to speak, with the fourth generation, going on fifth generation type technologies that we have here? What would be your suggestion to them, to where they could start in terms of developing that technology? That's why I asked you earlier if AI could be transported to the islands without an infrastructure to follow it. Could it be instantiated on a less than third generation infrastructure? Concerns like that. Yeah.
Hey,
Daniela, you still there? Did anybody else have any questions from the audience, by the way? We can field general questions out. Dr. Nelson, did you have any concerns they might be able to answer?
Not yes and no. My concerns remain the fact that we know for a fact that there are many incidents that have been happening on the ground. And I guess I can't speak out of term. I know that there has been some work done on the policy framework, but I'm not sure if we actually have the laws in place fully across the region. This might be outside the scope of this panel, but I just want to flag it as something that we need to be looking at. We're talking about moving towards the Caribbean Court of Justice. Are the justices trained to even understand this? So from a systemic perspective, I think for those of us, here we have Jonathan is saying Trinidad failed to pass these laws. So I think one of the things we can do is maybe we can get together with the computer science community, NGOs, etc., or the human rights NGOs, and organize maybe a series of public education seminars that deal more with the data and human rights, the future of data and human rights, the future of privacy, the future of the right to have a court system that understands what it is you're doing. Because I know for sure the fisher folk were saying that even though people are fishing in their waters, those issues are not, those data is not admissible in court, right? So they have no recourse. So they're told not to fish, and other boats of other countries are coming to fish in our waters. So these are things that plague us in terms of security, which are not obvious to the average person. But these are things that chip away at the rule of law. I do know that there are people individually talking about this, but I'm not sure that we have made it clearly and more regularly known to the average person, because everybody has a smartphone right now. Everybody has become a journalist. Everybody has become a journalist or a witness of a sort. And so we have to make sure that we're educating the public to understand what it means to have the power of a smartphone, how they themselves might be liable if they release people's information because they took their picture at a party and you post it online on social media without asking permission. You can also be liable for invasion of privacy. So I think maybe the most that we can do as diaspora in working in this space, Stephen Wong, Francis Fegula, is maybe support us in, and of course, I would have to call her our lead advisor on security, Daniela Magana. I think what we could probably ask you to do is maybe support us if we can find the right partners on the ground to have this kind of a conversation. And that might be the best we can do at this point in time in terms of what we can do with what we have. The government will have to do what they do. And I think she shared some tool resources that you could use to get started. Is it check your own self? But I think the human rights community and the justice community and the legal community in the region has to do the work necessary to ensure that we're ready. Now, I would like to just, before we go, let me just say, we've been joined by Congresswoman Clark, and I know she has a very short time when she can be in here. She's ready to speak, so if we could just pause and come back to close out, I will bring her up immediately so she can join us, and then we can go back. Congresswoman Clark, welcome, welcome, welcome. We are glad you're able to join us. I'm not sure if you're seeing me perched in the gallery. maybe I am. You're seeing me, great. Okay, so thank you for joining us, and I'm giving you the floor.
Well, first of all, let me thank you for convening us, Dr. Nelson, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure and a privilege to join you all for Caribbean American Legislative Week. And what an esteemed honor it is to connect with my brilliant friend, a true Renaissance woman with an incredible background that includes being the founder of the Institute of Caribbean Studies, as well as being recognized as a White House champion for change, Dr. Claire Nelson. Thank you for having me, and I apologize for the delay, but you may have heard that we had some very crucial legislation on the floor of the House today. We just completed our voting, and I was just able to join you. Let me say a happy Caribbean American Heritage Month to everyone. And, as a senior member of both the House Energy and Commerce Committee, the House Committee on Homeland Security, where I serve as the chair of the Cybersecurity, Infrastructure Protection, and Innovation Subcommittee, I'm happy to see our government prioritizing addressing cyber threats by increasing investments in cybersecurity and prioritizing the development of a cyber talent pipeline. Enhancing cybersecurity of state and local governments, including the Caribbean region, has been a focus of mine in Congress. It's no secret that Caribbean governments have seen an onslaught of upheavals and insecurities in recent years and need to strengthen their security defenses, as well as increase private sector and civil society interactions. The Caribbean region is at the end of its rope as they continue to face food insecurity, energy challenges, investment and finance issues. And this is not just a regional concern, it's a global security concern. And that's why, as the founder and co-chair of the Caribbean Caucus in the House of Representatives, as well as the Haiti Caucus, and especially as a proud Caribbean American, I continue to implore, push, cajole, and advocate on behalf of our Caribbean nations. Our government must be a supportive partner through these very tough times by providing additional resources, including enhancing information sharing to improve the economic structure of struggling nations in the region. As I constantly put it, there needs to be a pivot in the U.S. State Department's approach to interfacing with the Caribbean region. I will continue to work in Congress, including with the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, to ensure that Caribbean governments get the assistance they need to improve conditions on the ground and to build concrete and specific solutions to address the concerns highlighted by the Summit of the Americas through CARICOM. The United States is aimed and committed to engaging Caribbean governments to reach an outcome they see as being achievable. And we are working on establishing lasting solutions as quickly as we can. But again, I really believe that our State Department needs to pivot in terms of putting behind them, quite frankly, a notion that the Caribbean region is a donor region as opposed to a partner. Solutions for the Caribbean region will require robust congressional support because the financial needs of the region are not being met by the current structure. We must think more broadly to consider the climate shock and climate change that severely impacts the Caribbean region and its ability to respond to different threats. From the tourism industry to other existential challenges, including how to respond to environmental and natural disasters, Caribbean states with long-standing problems saw conditions exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. Protections are needed to address the rising sea level in the region as well, because it directly impacts the socioeconomic conditions on the ground. Following the Summit of the Americas, President Biden expressed his commitment to work with the leaders in the region as rapidly as possible to improve conditions. And when it comes to energy, the U.S. must assist in the transition to clean energy, and the Caribbean region has a great need for that. We must also practice what we preach. The region in no way, as compared to the United States and Canada, contributes to the largest extent the CO2 emissions that contribute to climate change and that make it more challenging for the Caribbean region. Unfortunately, the politics of the energy crisis is incredibly challenging, and the Caribbean people are certainly feeling the shock of this challenge, especially in places like Haiti, where the high cost of fuel has only worsened the economic concerns there, and even threatening to create an even worse conditions for people on the ground. There are no easy answers, but there is a lot of work to be done. Trafficking is also a huge concern for the region, gun trafficking in particular, and representatives of the area, including CARICOM, expressed the need for support. The trafficking creates extreme migrating pressures, including the trafficking of drugs and illegal arms. I will continue to push for the necessary resources to help change the security dynamic in the region. Again, looking at Haiti, where the situation is so critical. And we can't forget that COVID-19 has been a disaster for the region. There's also a great deal of mistrust among Caribbean communities as it pertains to the COVID-19 vaccines. Tourism in many of our Caribbean states have been devastated, exacerbating the region's debt crisis. And this has also led to a high rise in crime, similar to what we're seeing here in the US. But when we're talking about the states of the Caribbean, it's amplified even larger. Nonetheless, this moment is ripe with opportunities, and what we must be intentional about these relationships to create economic growth. And that will require establishing a more efficient government, improving current policies that are unfriendly to the private sector, and enacting creative solutions to improve the region's economic state. As longstanding allies that have maintained a special bond for generations, when you think about the number of nationals that have migrated to the United States from throughout the region, it is important that we are currently recognized and celebrated in the United States during the month of June as National Caribbean American Heritage Month. We must continue to work to bring forth a whole range of other fundamental and transformational ideas and solutions that will help fund the region, which in turn will benefit all cooperating countries. So let me close by saying that it is my honest belief that we have not maximized on our leverage here in the United States. And that leverage, quite frankly, works for us domestically and internationally. That leverage is the vote. That leverage is the vote. Having such an international constituency in New York, in Brooklyn, New York, I am constantly reminded of how other immigrants to the United States have been extremely influential, using their franchise to really shape US policy towards their homes of origin. Whether you want to talk about Israel, you want to talk about Ireland or Italy, the three I's as we call it in New York, they have been extremely successful in marshaling their diaspora to leverage their franchise and their representation to make a difference from their with respect to the United States and their homes of origin. We have the same capacity if we choose to use it. So once again, let me just thank you all for giving me this opportunity to join you for this very important Caribbean American Legislative Week. And I look forward to our next convening. You should know that we have a number of friends on Capitol Hill. There is no one who has been more of a champion, quite frankly, than Congresswoman Barbara Lee of Oakland, California. She is an appropriator, and she has not missed an opportunity within the budget cycle as the chairwoman of the subcommittee of appropriations for international affairs to put funding in the United States budget to meet some of the goals of the Caribbean region, to put a marker, if you will, down on ways in which we would like to direct the State Department in giving assistance to the region. We need to maximize on that. We need to grow those funds, and we need to direct each project that we would like to see embarked upon, working with her in the years to come. So let me again just thank you for giving me the opportunity to join with you. And Dr. Nelson, let me thank you for your leadership, your enduring leadership. You have not failed to be there for our folks and to convene us on an annual basis. And for that, we are truly grateful.
Thank you,
Yes.
Congresswoman. Do you have any time for any questions or?
Absolutely, absolutely.
If you could make sure I can come down here a little bit. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Again, you heard it. It's like you were hearing my voice. I just posted, people don't understand that we in the diaspora are learning, the grassroots community is learning to understand how we might actually exercise our franchise. Now, you know that Public Law 114291 or HR, the famous HR that Mr. Engel did before he left, is an opportunity that says State Department should present to the Congress every 3 years a strategy. When can we anticipate a hearing on that strategy for 2022, I guess, to 2025 or something thereof?
Well, it's actually due right now. The members of the Caribbean Caucus have had conversations with Deputy Chief of Staff, Brian Nichols, and he has assured us that they are currently embarking on that update. And, you know, we're holding their feet to the fire. It's our hope that we will receive those findings prior to the ending of this session. We will be coming back to Washington after 2 weeks in our constituencies in the mid-July. My staff will be working in the interim to make sure that you know, we get a date certain, and our hope is that it is prepared because we requested this quite a few months ago, and we'll be able to then share those findings with you, Dr. Nelson.
Well, we are actually working this week's conversations will result in an update to our green paper or white paper or a non-paper, whatever you want to call the paper. And we will share a copy of that with the members of the Caribbean Caucus so you understand what is the diaspora saying that we think would happen. The other piece of it that we have had some conversations with the new Deputy Assistant Secretary, Ms. Barbara Feinstein, who herself has said that she understands it's time for a new relationship, a pivot, if you will, in the role of the diaspora. And we have complained for some time that we put ideas out, but as you know, most of our organizations are volunteer organizations. There's no funding for ICS, for the groups that are doing medical missions, the things we want to do. And so we've said to her, it's all well and good, yes, that we are volunteers, but when there's funding being put through universities, for example, in the United States, or other big NGOs, we want to make sure that your proposals that tend to be so these are well-established groups, that they are given instructions to really include the diaspora in a meaningful way. We actually resent being invited to pick our brains, but nobody's hired or no group is funded to support the research on the ground or deliver services. So I do hope in your hearing that you will have that this conversation comes up, because we understand everybody here has another full-time job, but the level of effort that investment in human capital that diaspora puts out should not be undercounted and therefore underleveraged in the execution once things are funded. And so we do want to put it on the table that when the hearing is heard, that this issue of diaspora participation to be paid to do certain things is something we want to see happen.
Absolutely, Dr. Nelson. On that very point, you know, we have been really talking to the Biden administration about what that commitment to equity that the president has articulated looks like in the international context. And having said that, you know, it's clear to us, particularly members of the Caribbean Caucus, that there has been such an inequitable distribution of resource to our smaller NGOs, Black-led, minority-led NGOs that are grassroots, that are community-based, that we are really focused on getting the administration to work with their State Department, with the Secretary, to look at reformulating, if you will, or establishing a funding stream that would include the type of financial support that lifts up the policy work that is being done, that is reflective of the lived experiences of individuals who come from the region, who have their own academic bona fides and are getting real-time information that is more reflective of the realities on the ground in the CARICOM states. What I have found is that the State Department reports, it's like warmed over. They're not, going beyond, findings that are decades old. And as a result of that, the policies have changed at the margins. We've got to do better. The Obama administration acknowledged this, but again, there wasn't a significant shift. And I think now that we have the Biden administration in, at least for the next 2 years, we've got to leverage the commitment to equity to turn the page on the means by which they have been funding organizations all of these years.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Yvette Clarke. We just really are happy you could stop by. Really excited. Just to give you some good news, we have been talking to the Caribbean Research Center at Medgar Evers, and ICS has an MOU with that organization, and we're talking about how might they become a partner in developing our grassroots of communities to be better trained to engage in policy dialogue and move away from saying either we don't have time for vote, or they vote but they don't show up at town hall meetings, they don't show up at these hearings, which also does a disservice. And so we're really hoping that in the next, as you say, in this next few years, we don't return to the old normal, but we post towards a new normal and the smart futures. Census told us that there are 300,000 plus Jamaicans alone in New York, right? Out of the 1.18 million they think they have as of 2019. The 2020 numbers are not in as yet. So you see why it's important. That's more Jamaicans than what is in so many islands in the Caribbean.
That's right.
So,
absolutely.
So we do hope.
Or U.S. territories for that matter.
Right. So we do hope we can turn on more people that are doing some really great work on the ground in healthcare, in youth training. We had a really good morning, and we'll talk offline on the lessons we have learned from Herbert Gale, for example, Dr. Herbert Gale, who gave a really stirring recommendation around gangs and violence, which is important because we know the interplay of gangs in New York and gangs in Caribbean. So we have a lot of work that we can do, and we're just grateful that you're here to demonstrate your commitment to that partnership.
Absolutely. Thank you once again for inviting me, Dr. Nelson, and to all of the panelists and participants. Thank you for your sacrifice and commitment to really engaging the United States Congress, my office, in these very important issues. I have been on sort of this mantra since the very first days of entering the United States House of Representatives, closing out my 16th year in Congress, and I'd like to see some results before I get to the point of retirement. And so we've got to work together. We've got to be intentional in making a difference. This pivot must occur. There's no way that we can have a hemisphere as unstable as ours and think that those contributions that we have made in helping to build the United States should not be accruing to the region from whence we've come as well. So thank you once again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone.
I was trying to say bye on my voice, but I couldn't do it.
So thank you, everyone. I will return the floor to I think Garth to close out his panel, and I think the people from trafficking are here.
We're running a little bit behind, Garth. I think you're muted, Garth.
Oh, we do have to do a hard stop again at the end of the panel.
Okay.
Okay, just to say, yeah, we did in fact cover, you know, all the ground we intended to. Yes, it was very technical, but unfortunately in cyber, when it comes to cyber, technology drives policy so closely that it's hard to separate them. Bottom line is, you know, what I'm hoping for, from my perspective, is with the emergence of technologies like IoT, the 5G technology is moving pretty rapidly. It's going to be in the islands. It's already in some islands, you know, and we can expect it to proliferate in a short period of time. Cyber will need to follow very closely behind a lot of these technologies, you know, to keep us above ground. Our power systems are unprotected. Most of, you know, we already have power issues without them being hacked. So we can imagine the kind of potential detriments that we have to deal with technology, without good, robust cyber policy driven by technology. So all in all, I'd like to say I thank my fellow panelists, you know, for showing up, Francis, Daniela, and Stephen. Thank you so much for your invaluable contribution. Really appreciated it. You know, and hopefully we can have something more sort of robust, more tangible to offer him the next round, you know, the next forum. Thank you all, you know, and have a great day. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. And
Bye.
thanks, Garth. Good job. Without further ado, is Donna available? Where's she at? Oh, there you are. Okay.